Hey guys, this is Anthony Morganti from AnthonyMorganti.com. This is episode 16 of the video series where I critique and process your image. In this episode, we're taking a look at this image from Byron. Now, Byron told me that he was trying to give you a sense of place with this shot. How the carving of the angel related to everything else in the church, that it's at the end of the pew and where it was in the church. And I think he did a great job. It's really a nice shot. And I think it's something that we could work with and really make into a very dramatic shot. Now, one thing my students often say to me, I mean, really, all of them almost say this to me. They're out taking pictures and they hear my voice in their head saying, work the scene. And the reason being is I found that the first picture you take, or when you come upon the scene, the first thing that jumps in your head that you want to capture might not, or usually isn't, the best picture that you'll end up getting if you stay and work the scene. And I think there's a better picture in this scene. And I think we could get it with some creative cropping. Now, I don't like to crop. That's why I say work the scene. You want to try to keep as many pixels as possible, so you don't want to crop those away. So get in closer, get in tighter, get different angles, shoot up, shoot down if possible. Try different things out. Make sure you're aware of what's in the background, what's behind the angel, and how you're framing, let's say, the angel's face and wings and what the angel is holding compared to what's in the background. So work the scene, try to get different shots, and you'll often surprise yourself at some of the really great images you should capture. Now we're going to crop this in a minute. We'll talk about what I would be looking for. And again, this is personal artistic preference. You guys might be different. You do it your way and what works for you. Now, as far as the technical camera settings, I think Byron did a great job. It was at 1/40th of a second, f at 2.8, ISO 800. It was an Olympus 12 to 40 millimeter f at 2-point lens at 12 millimeters. Now, he mentioned that he didn't want to put ISO much higher, and he wanted to blur the background out a little. So he did a great job. The ISO 800 is fine. There is some noise. We'll deal with that later. 1/40th of a second. If you start, stopping down a little bit, then you're really going to have too slow of a shutter speed, and you're going to have to up the ISO. So there's all these, this balancing act you have to do with the three factors that govern exposure in a non-flash image like this. So 1/40th of a second f at 2.8 ISO 800, perfect. I mean, I don't think he could have done anything better. 12 millimeters fine, it gives you a nice wide view. You get an idea of what we're looking at here. Now, it was an Olympus micro four thirds camera, so the lens corrections are built in. So we don't have to worry about enabling those. We will remove chromatic aberration just to do that. Now, I'm going to jump right into cropping it. Now, I mentioned that you work the scene, get different angles, and I appreciate what he was going for here, trying to give you a sense of place and how this angel related to everything else in the scene. But I don't necessarily think that that is the best, most dramatic, most impactful way to shoot the scene. And I think if we crop it, I could come up with something, at least for me, from my artistic perspective, is a little more dramatic. And again, now this is micro four thirds, so it's in a 4:3 aspect ratio. And I've mentioned many times I prefer the 3:2 aspect ratio, and that isn't like written in stone that everyone in the photography community prefers a 3:2 aspect. It's just my preference because I've shot 35 millimeter film for so long. I'm just so used to looking at images in a 3:2 aspect ratio. I prefer that aspect ratio. So I'm going to crop to a 3:2. So I'm going to go down here at this drop down and I'm going to go to 2:3, 4:6. So we're going to crop into that aspect ratio. Now I have the overlay set for rule of thirds, and I think we're going to use a rule of thirds crop for this. What I want is I want the angel's eye right at a point of intersection. I think I want it at this point of intersection. So I have to crop it so the angel's eye gets over to this point of intersection. So I'm probably going to have to crop out quite a bit, and which isn't always preferable because you don't want to lose too many pixels. That's why I say work the scene. All right, now I did it, whereas this is over the point of intersection. I don't care for it. We have too much space between the angel's wing and back here. I really want to eliminate that, so I'm actually going to crop it a little more. All right, so we're just going to keep cropping away until that space is pretty much eliminated. We still could tell that's an angel. Those are wings. All right, but we're just going to eliminate that space. Simple as that, like that. So to me, this is a more dramatic look. The angel now, remember I mentioned in past videos, if you have something with eyes, and I mentioned animals or people, I think it could go for carvings and statues also, is if they're looking off camera, you'd prefer them to be looking into the larger part of the frame. And that's what I did with this crop. The rule of intersection, or the rule of thirds point of intersection on the upper third left-hand side is right at this angel's eye. And that's where you would prefer to put it if you're going to use it for someone with eyes, something with eyes. You'd put their eye right at that point of intersection. And you can see how it's looking off frame into the larger part of the frame. So I think this is a more dramatic view of the scene. Now I am conceding something away that Byron was going for. He wanted to make you aware that this was a carving at the end of the pew. You don't necessarily know that anymore. But if you work the scene, you have that shot, and then you have this shot. And this is something else, all right? Something else you're going for. So I do like this. Now, my other goal as I look at it now, I really like how the light is softly falling on the features of the carving. You can see the cheeks and the forehead. I like that. I want to make sure that I don't lose that in my processing. If anything, I enhance it with my processing. Now also there's some noise in here. Now I am going to use Topaz Denoise to get rid of the noise. I've done several of these videos already now where I've used Lightroom to get rid of the noise, and I wouldn't do anything different if all I wanted to do is Lightroom, anything different from those previous videos. So I'm not going to do anything with noise in Lightroom in this video. I am going to use it to denoise because I do want to give you a tip about using any external plugin for noise. But before I do that, I am going to do some basic programming. I'd rather work with the raw file as long as possible. So because those external programs don't take raw files, they'll change it into a TIFF file and then use it there. So we're going to process the raw file. So I'm going to bring highlights down because I want to try to get the background a little more under control. I want to give that sense of depth. I want the soft light hitting the angel's face, knuckles, things like that. I want that to be your attention, and the background to look a little more in the background and give you that sense of depth. So I'm going to bring highlights down. So that helped a little bit there, brought those bright areas under control. Now I'm going to open shadows up just to give more view into the carving, but when I add contrast and later clarity, it's going to cut into that a little bit. So basically I'm flattening out the image so that later I could give it a lot more depth with tonal depth with dark parts of the image and lighter parts of the image. So we open shadows quite a bit. I'm going to jump down to vibrance, and I don't want to add too much vibrance, just like under 10 is good, just a little bit, because when you work with raw files it tends to make things a little duller, so I want to bring that back. I'm not going to add any saturation at all. We're going to do clarity later. I'm going to go to the tone curve to add my contrast. We're going to look at medium, and then we're going to look at strong. I think I prefer strong, but I'm going to go with medium for now because we're going to do whites and blacks and see what happens there. So I'm going to double click. I'm going to hold the shift key in and double click on the word whites to get a quick white point. It just turned whites up a little bit. We're going to hold the shift key in and double click on the word blacks to get a black point. Now it did bring blacks down a little further than it brought whites up. So it did give us a little more tonal depth, so I like that. And I do like how the light is still falling on the features of the angel, and that seems to be standing out a little more. And to me, it seems like the angel is really in the foreground and giving us a lot of depth in the image. So the angel really looks more three-dimensional, like the angel's way out here, and the background is way back there, and we have this depth. So I really like that. Now, we wouldn't do anything in the HSL color B&W tab. We're going to not do any split toning here. Now, the next thing I would do would be noise reduction. And I mentioned I've done Lightroom noise reduction several times, and I would just follow those same ways I do things. I'd bring it up to a number and move it around until I hone in to where the noise reduction is perfect, and I do the same thing with sharpening. I'm just going to jump right into the denoise because that's the preferable way I would do it. So I'm going to bring sharpening down to 0 because it's easier to get rid of noise if you didn't sharpen it first. It's just much easier. Now, the other thing I found when using an external plugin to get rid of noise, they seem to work better. Now, all of them, not just Denoise, and I've used pretty much all of them because, this is what I do. I teach photography, so I try different things out. And I found that all of them seem to work better if you send the entire full resolution image to it instead of a crop version. They seem to just get rid of the noise better and preserve detail better if you send the entire image to it. Now I already cropped this and I cropped it considerably. So what I'm going to do to get around that is I'm going to first create a virtual copy. So I'm just going to right click on the thumbnail down there in the film strip and then go to create virtual copy. And as you know, when you send these things over to these plugins, they don't work with raw files. They're going to create a TIFF file to begin with. So we're going to create a TIFF file from this virtual copy, which would be the exact same thing if we created the raw file from the actual, or a TIFF file from the actual raw file. But what we're going to do with this is I'm going to go over to the crop tool where I cropped it, and I'm going to go back to as shot. So I'm uncropping it. I'm sending this to the noise reduction software. Then when it comes back from the noise reduction software, we'll copy our crop back onto it. Okay, so this is just a little tip I'm giving you. If you're using an external program to reduce noise, they seem to work better if you send the entire full resolution image to it, then crop later. So I'm going to right click. I'm going to go to Edit In, and I am going to go down to Topaz Denoise 6. And again, it creates that TIFF file. We're going to click Edit. And then when it comes back, I'll delete that virtual copy because we won't need it any longer. So, okay, this is it. It's an Olympus camera. It was a E-M5 Mark II, and they don't have a preset for that. They have one for an E-M1. We'll try that. This was shot at ISO 800, so we'll try ISO 800. And it's very rare that I've found the ISO to actually do, like, clicking on this 800 preset, ISO 800 preset, will work the best. Usually something else. And actually that didn't seem to do much. Did a little. So we're going to go right up to 1600. And this is what I do is I try these presets out one by one. That didn't seem to do anything over the 800. Go to 3200. It did a little bit. Let's take this add grain down. And I kind of like that. You can see as I moved it, it's getting rid of the noise fairly well. So we're going to go with that. So actually 3200, we're going to click OK. Now it's going to get rid of the noise in this TIFF file. It's going to bring us back over to Lightroom. Lightroom is going to blink a few times as it catches up to the metadata. Once all that is done, I'm going to delete that virtual copy. So now we just have the original raw file and this TIFF file, which we're going to continue our processing on. I am going to copy the crop over from that original file, the original raw file. So we have the exact same crop now. And then really all we have to do is sharpen the image and add some clarity. And I think maybe if we want to add a vignette, and we're done. So it's going to blink a few times. At least it should blink. It's making a liar out of me, but that's okay. Sometimes if it doesn't blink, it comes up with an error. Like in the error, it's going to be an exclamation point down here in the right-hand corner top right-hand corner of the thumbnail saying that the metadata was different or something along those lines. But this is the original RAW file virtual copy, the virtual copy from the RAW file. So we're going to get rid of that because I don't need that anymore. All right, see, this is it right here. If you see right here in the upper right-hand corner, it has this kind of 3 lines and an up arrow. And if you click on that, it says the metadata for this folder has been changed by another application. Should Lightroom import the settings from disk or overwrite the disk settings with those from the catalog? We want to import the settings from the disk because that is what Denoise did. It wrote those settings to the disk, and for some reason Lightroom didn't read them. So we're going to import those settings from the disk. Now there is our noise reduced copy, but it's not cropped. So we're going to copy the crop. We're going to go over on the original RAW file that I have cropped. Then I'm going to hold the Command key in because I'm working with a Mac. If you have a PC, hold the Control key in and double click, or just single click, I'm sorry, on our Tiff file that we reduced the noise. Then we're going to click Sync over here in the right-hand panel. And you probably have them all checked. What I suggest you do is just go check None, and then we're going to copy the crop, just the crop. And we're going to click Synchronize. And what it will do now is it copied the crop from this crop from the RAW file to our TIFF file. And if we select them both and hit the C key to compare them, and we zoom in, this is the RAW file, and you could see, let's say, right in front of the angel's face, there's a lot of noise in here, and you can see all that noise is gone here. And the detail's a little bit softer over here than over here, but we're going to get rid of that, or we're going to gain that detail back in a minute. So we're on our TIFF file now, and really we'll jump back over here to the Develop module, and we're going to go down to Detail. And I'm going to zoom in a little and just make sure that I'm not adding a lot of noise. So I'm going to pull sharpening up to 70. And I did enhance noise just a little bit in here, but I do like the way it sharpened our angel. And I really can't see much noise on the angel itself, just on the background. So I'm just going to mask it out from the background. I'm going to hold the Alt or Option key. It's Alt if you have PC, Option if you have a Mac. Click on that masking slider, move it to the right, and we're just going to sharpen the edges of our angel, the stained glass, the candle holders, the flowers. Those don't have to be sharp anyway. That's all blurred out anyway. So we have a lot of great depth, I think, in this shot. We have the angel looking off into the larger part of the frame. Remember I mentioned if you have something with eyes, and in those previous videos, you know, I mentioned animals or people. I guess I should add carvings and statues. If you have something like that with eyes looking off camera, have them looking into the larger part of the frame. That's what our crop accomplished. The way I processed it, just to kind of bring out these highlights a little bit and give a lot of tonal value between the darker parts of the image and the brighter parts of the image, it seemed to help add depth to the shot. So I think that helped a lot. We're going to jump up to the basic panel, and we're going to go to clarity now, which I didn't add clarity to that original shot. And as I move that to the right, you can see it kind of brings out those highlights even a little more. So I like that. And I think finally we'll finish this off with a dark vignette, but not a heavy dark vignette, just a very light one. And of course, I mentioned all the time about these vignettes. The way I like to add them is it kind of pulls your attention more towards the middle of the image. So this image, as it is now, is 100% finished. Noise was reduced nicely. We have it nice and sharp. I like this crop better than the original crop. Now here is the RAW file before we send it to Denoise. I'm going to reset it. So there's the original image as shot. And here is the one after processing and cropping. And I think, I really do think that cropping add a lot of drama to the shot. Now again, I kind of, in cropping it, I gave away what Byron was going for. He was going for a sense of place. So you knew that this was a carving at the end of the pew. don't necessarily know that anymore. So, like I said, work the scene, get that shot. Now you have that recorded, then work on some more dramatic image. And I think what adds depth to the shot also is the wall that is directly behind the angel's head is much brighter than the angel's actual head. And that adds a lot of nice depth to the image. That's why I mentioned earlier, when you're working the scene, see how the background is relating to the subject and make sure that you're framing it properly. You don't want to, have the background distract from the subject. You want it to strengthen the subject. And I think that's what this crop accomplished. So, thank you very much, Byron. I'm losing my voice. Thank you, Byron, for sharing your image with us. It's a great scene. It looks like a very beautiful church. Thank you, everyone that watches my videos. I truly do appreciate it. I'm going to go get some water, and then I'll talk to you guys soon.